Welcome to Alan Skorsky Reports. I'm Alan Skorsky. Since October 7th of 2023, the Islamist and Marxist movements in America and across the West, who have spent decades targeting Israel for elimination, ramped up their activism across academia, all levels of government, and the media. Over the last year, pundits from the right, particularly those like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, who used to be friends and supporters of Israel, have done complete 180s, finding it more profitable to be on the side of those who believe the U.S. supports Israel unconditionally, and that Israel is nothing but a drain on the U.S. economy and foreign policy. More dangerously, Tucker Carlson, who has a significant platform because of his time at Fox News, has a strong relationship with Vice President Vance, who many believe has the inside track for 2028 if he chooses to run for president. For the first time in decades, supporters of Israel find themselves surrounded by dangerous propaganda forces. We are either forced to explain and defend Israel's legitimacy as a Jewish homeland and why Hamas is evil, and on the other side, we find ourselves having to explain why the U.S.-Israel relationship is America first. Israel's contributions to the world are significant, particularly in technology, medicine, agriculture, security, stemming from the high R&D investment and a focus on innovation, giving the world inventions like the USB flash drive, drip irrigation, Waze, Mobileye, PillCam, and advanced cybersecurity defense systems alongside cultural exports and humanitarian aid. Recently, Tucker Carlson told his followers that Israel takes from the U.S., but that the U.S. derives nothing in return from Israel, and that Mike Pompeo lied when he said that Israel was America's greatest ally. Today's guest is Gedaliah Blum, director of the Heartland Initiative, who recently gave a very powerful response to Tucker Carlson's question, what does the U.S. get from Israel? Gedaliah, it's an honor to have you on today. In your response to Tucker Carlson in your video, you basically rattled off in rapid machine gun fire prose 26 things the U.S. benefits from Israel, in sharp contrast to what the U.S. gets from Tucker's benefactors, the Sheikhs of Qatar. So, with that, I welcome you to the show. It's great to have you. And one thing that scares me, and this is why I want to have you on, we all know that the relationship is a very bilateral. The U.S. gets a lot from Israel, but we can say Iron Dome, we can say medicine and high tech, but most people don't know what any of that means. So the reason I want to have you today is not only to answer and give a more in-depth explanation, but to almost make this like Tucker Carlson must be challenged. This can't just be another video responding to somebody, because we'll be doing this all day long if we have to do that, but to have a really good tachlis, a real substance as to why the U.S.-Israel relationship is so vital for both countries and why support for Israel is part of the Israel first, the America first agenda.
Yeah, so I mean that's a pretty heavy subject because there's so many layers to this, and I feel like we end up getting stuck in a lot of the superficial levels, right? I mean, just today I posted on my X account a video of Tucker Carlson asking questions, saying, I don't even know if Hamas is even a terrorist organization. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. I don't know. And after 30 years of being in media, in research, in production, that you can't make a determination that a 5-year-old boy who lives on the Gaza border could be able to make that determination? I don't understand. So we could get stuck into that rabbit hole about getting involved in that, or we could get really down deep to the core. Right. And I'm not trying to get off subject, but I just want to at least acknowledge that there is a core issue here. And the core issue here is this, is that this is going really core issue, by the way. Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses received the Bible on Mount Sinai. And most people don't understand that it wasn't just a book of directions for the world, for the Jews, for the world, but it was actually a new world order. It was a threat to the power, to levers of power that existed back then, the kings who felt that they were more of a deity than equal to their servants. But our Bible, our Torah says that no, in the eyes of God, you're equal. So this became a very strong opposition to their power structure. So they were opposing it. That still exists today. The Islamism, the wokeism, the communism, the socialism, all the isms are all converging together as we see, right? We have lesbians for Palestine. How is that possible?
Right.
Because they converge against this new world order that we're still fighting to bring into this world. And I think when you put that in perspective, and now you get to Tucker Carlson, is who is really orchestrating his production, who's signing his checks. And he has partners that are registered Democrats. He's got partners that are connected to the Muslim Brotherhood. And we know that he goes to Qatar, which has been taken over by Muslim Brotherhood. And the Muslim Brotherhood in of itself is one of these isms, Islamism, that is diabolically opposed to the Bible, the Torah, into this world. Because for them, it becomes more of a political movement than a book of ethics and in a way of life. So with that being said, now everything we want to talk about now is not the core issue, but it's how he weaponizes it, how Tucker Carlson and this woke right. I'm not talking about the Islamism. I mean, that's clear. It should be clear to everybody that they want world domination and that they want to kill the Jews. I'm not saying all Muslims do, but there's political Islam, and we need to be very careful of it. And we see it around the world, and unfortunately, many people in Europe are seeing it way too late. So, but when it comes to the weaponization of words, of narrative, they see, by the way, I don't even think it has to do with Jew hatred. I think it has to do with that they want to upend Western civilization, which comes from the Bible, comes from Mount Sinai. But when they do analytics, when they see the algorithm, and they see what really divides the West more than anything, Jews, Israel, these are things. Go on. Piers Morgan's YouTube channel. Go to Candace Owens and see when it says Jews or Israel in the title, or when they have guests talking about Jews or Israel. Look at their view count in opposed to other subjects. You're talking about 3x, 4x. This is big money issue, right? This is big money issue for the content creators, but it's a weapon for their puppet masters that are looking to upend Western civilization, create divide. So then they start doing this. And one of the subjects, as you brought up, and one of the subjects I responded to was Tucker Carlson using the idea that Israel is actually more of a liability than anything, than an asset. And you know what? Israel is a liability to the world if you're looking to find favor in countries like Qatar. Absolutely, it's an asset. But when you're talking about your children, when you're talking about your values, when Western civilization, how people grew up in America, in the West, how they grew up in Paris, how they grew up in England. No, it's not in the best interest to align yourself with those that seek our demise, but instead, I think to seek those, seek alliances with those who want to protect it, and those who actually were the original receivers of the Bible on Mount Sinai.
I'm going to give you one example because I always go back to this because I did a lot of Google searching and just looking for other information about Israel's contribution to America, Israel's contribution to the West. And I remember so succinctly, because this was on CNN of all places, back in 2010 under the Obama administration, when you had the earthquake in Haiti. And I remember this even without Googling it, but this was just from the New England Journal of Medicine. Within 48 hours after the massive earthquake at struck Port-au-Prince, the government of Israel dispatched a military task force consisting of 230 people. Okay? Within 15 hours, this is what they treated 1,100 patients. 960 were treated in the hospital, among them dozens of children. 294 life-saving operations had been performed. 16 babies were born in this mini hospital. And CNN, of all networks, was reporting how they were blown away with all the countries that came in to help, how Israel, little tiny Israel, far surpassed everybody. Now, just as a side note, because this news was too good to be not responded to, the Palestinian Authority said that Israel was there to harvest their organs. But that's a side note. But I want to go again because you listed a lot of things, and I want to just try and go through as many as we can, but with specifics. We talk about the Iron Dome. So if you
Yeah.
ask anyone about the Iron Dome, we'll say, well, the Iron Dome protects Israel against incoming rockets. Um, in the list, we said that Iron Dome protects American troops overseas, or there's the anti-drone systems for airports and stadiums. So if you can you elaborate on these or any of the other issues that you had given? Because again, there were like close to 30 that you listed that in specifics how the U.S. has benefited from their collaborating with Israel.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll tell you this right now. When it comes to the financing, much of the financing does come from America. The R&D, the research and
Right.
development, comes from our scientists here in Israel. But most importantly, because you could develop any technology that you want, but unless you're testing it, not in a laboratory setting, but in a real setting,
Right.
you really don't know if it's going to work. So most of the weapons, the Iron Dome, the Arrow, the David Sling, all of these anti-missile, anti-ballistic missile, anti-rocket, these different levels, and now we have the laser,
Right.
this laser that shoots down missiles at a fraction of the cost. These are actually being tested in real time. And not only that, but the actual data, the analytics goes to the labs in America so they could study them, so they could develop them better. And now, not only for Israel, but for America, let's just say, I mean, you're talking about protecting, using the same technology in defense systems that have been, tested. Where beforehand, I think during Desert Storm, I think that there was like, I forget what kind of systems were in place, but I think they were like maybe 30, 40% effective, even
Right.
10% effective. Now we're talking about 90 plus percent affected, effective, and that's through our joint development and research and testing in real time. Now they're being deployed wherever American forces are being deployed around the world in the bases, especially now when Iran is threatening um, to attack U.S. interests around the Middle East as they continue to yeah, oppress and to murder their own people on the streets. And so we are seeing absolutely in real time the benefits. But I also say this: the weapons development is great for our own use, but there's also an industry, and within this industry, when you develop something in Israel and you develop it with the United States, when you develop it with real data in real time and using it, as much as the world has been looking down at Israel and saying, "Look what you're doing in Gaza," they want to buy the same systems that we're using to defend ourselves and to fight. And so America certainly does benefit from that business transaction. So you're talking about like overall $3.8 billion is being utilized for this program. 70 to 75% of that money is being spent in America, hiring tens of thousands of people, developing planes, developing systems. And so, I mean, there's so many different things when it comes to missile systems, and I have a list I'm going through on my computer. I'm
Sure.
not I'm not ignoring over here.
No, it's all
Basic
good.
things,
Yeah.
counter IED protection. When soldiers are walking down the street in Fallujah, and there's an IED on the side of the street, how do you actually find it? And there's technology that we're creating that, again, as an ally, we're sharing everything pretty much.
Right.
Of course, we're not sharing everything. You can't share everything because, as you know, America-Israel relationships are kind of like a roller coaster a little bit. Under Obama, we felt that there was a lot of things, especially under his State Department, that we had to hold our cards very close to our chest because there is a deep state who don't like Israel. So there is that element. But when it comes to the current president, the current Secretary of State, our current ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, there's no daylight in between Israel and America. Um, medicine, battlefield medicine,
Right.
tourniquets, medical programs, massive long-term savings and survivability and recovery on the battlefield by our tried and tested, uh, 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 operations. Um, I mean, you're talking about so many. What else? What else is
I'll give you a couple of
counter?
examples. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah,
I think it was 1980. Israel was at war with over Lebanon. It was U.S. made fighter jets being flown by Israel versus Soviet MiGs being, I think it was Soviet MiGs being flown by Syria. Israel downed one Syrian jet after another. Israel lost none. And how were they distracting their missiles against Israeli jets? Dropping hot air balloons. Well, this was the U.S. versus Russia. When Israel just went into Iran last month or the month before and was able to go in there undetected, that was with U.S. made jets that Israel tinkered with and tweaked. And what did this do? So if anyone wants to know what America gets from Israel, that one operation alone must have made the hairs on the back of the necks of China, North Korea, and Russia stand. Because if Israel can get through to Iran undetected, and they're all allied, they're all using the same weapon systems, this is going to make them all think twice about what operations they can take, knowing that Israel is going to be sharing that technology with the United States.
that that's actually an interesting point because you bring up Russia, China, Iran, and if you actually notice those people who are talking about how Israel's a liability and not
Right.
an asset, and those examples that you just said, those same people who are saying Israel is a liability are the same people that say, yeah, Russia's pretty good. What's wrong
Tucker
with the
Carlson, yeah.
Iranian regime?
Yeah.
Like they're not so bad. China, look at their trains. Their trains are so fast. They're great,
Right.
right? And this is the kind of thing that people don't believe anymore, that maybe it's not called a Cold War anymore, but certainly we are in a Cold War. We are in a war, like I just said beforehand. At the core of the issue is that we are at war um, with a new world order that's 3,500 years old from when Moses received the Bible. And you could see all the countries lining up. Which side of the line are you on? And they line up very, very clearly, which is very interesting, though, is because when it actually comes to the Christians who are lining up on the other side against the Bible, um, there are connections to Muslim Brotherhood, and it is being this web of influence is being mapped and is being exposed as we speak right now, to how exactly they got involved in the conservative right movement. And there is a map. It's very deliberate, and there is a trail which will be exposed eventually. I believe very soon.
Well, listen, right now, again, we're seeing it. I'm on social media. Sometimes the stuff that I read on X, it's nauseating to read. And once in a while, I will dabble and get mixed up in these threads. But it's like we have a Torah or whatever we're reading from, and you can have Rashi and you can have other commentaries, but there's one overall meaning. It seems within Christianity, because there are, from what I've read, Beryl Wine wrote about this, 45,000 different denominations of Christianity. And Rabbi Tovia Singer has a whole, series about this, about the old Vatican, the new Vatican, I mean, stuff way above my pay grade. But he said Christian Zionism is basically a relatively new movement. The Christian evangelicals are very pro-Israel, but the old schools, like where the Candace Owens come from, where they reject the Vatican, that said that the Jews are not culpable for, what happened, to Jesus, thousands of years ago. But again, that's a different kind of war almost. I can't debate theology. I cannot debate with a Christian what they're supposed to interpret, what they believe. Um, but certainly with the Tucker Carlsons, who lie and they're high profiled, he should be much easier to defeat. I mean, Candace Owens is also easy to defeat because she cites, like recently showed a book, I forgot who the author is, but called The Talmudic Jew. But that author he was, completely discredited. Again, that's easy to do. Tucker, again, you just discredited him in 5 minutes. Shabbos Kestenbaum was on a panel recently and talked about all the benefits that the U.S. military gets from Israel. But what scares me is then, okay, so now take it to the next level. So we know the truth, but the truth isn't winning anymore. And I had this conversation with Lori Cardoza Moore, a Christian, evangelical, that it's not about truth anymore. It's about who has the most who has it's the bigger numbers game. There are 15 million Jews in the world, 2 billion Muslims. Even if half the Muslims don't subscribe to political Islam, you still have 1 billion who do. At them, the Marxists and everybody else, we're in trouble. So that's like another thing I want to ask you about with the work that you at Heartland. How do you put together a package where we're fighting different wars, but our message will come out on top?
Yeah, so I mean, listen. By the way, can you hear the rain?
No.
Okay, good.
Good.
All right, so listen. So I don't believe in the numbers game. I don't believe that I think it's a cop out. I think that although it is true that there are billions of our enemies, but I also see that there's a reason why Western civilization has been the framework of the greatest civilization development in the history of the world. So while we may be outnumbered, we are not being outsmarted. We are not being out. We have much more innovation. We have much more strength. And so, with that being said, I think what our problem is, and what our challenge is how do we get people stop being empathetic to what's going on? How do we get people activated? How do we get people who wake up one day and say, I don't recognize where I am from anymore? And I work a lot with Africans, and they ask me that all the time. How exactly, did we get here? And I know a lot of heads of state in Africa are hiring people from outside of Africa to do a deep dive intelligence investigation into how exactly there's been state takeovers. How exactly are they being, what's the word? I forget the word. They're being exploited. How exactly are they being exploited? They don't see, but there's a very coordinated effort, especially when it comes to Qatar, especially when it comes to Iran and India and the Muslim world, and China, especially, and Russia, and sometimes even India. And they're coming in, they're opening up these companies, and they're getting big contracts, and then they start paying people off, and they start buying politicians, and then they start owning them, and then the next thing you know is that policy is starting to change. And I think that how do you get past that? We have to create strength within our own community to not allow this Trojan horse to come in that's going to upend our civilization. And that's a big part of what I believe is the method of my work, is to ignore those that are going after us, not completely ignore them. Obviously, they're going to hit you over the head. You want to push them back. But we have much more to do in activating those that are already on our side. You don't have to tell them anything. You don't have to convince them of anything, except to use their two hands and their two arms in their mouth and to go out and to go do something, because they're not. Most people aren't doing anything. And the big question is, well, what can I do? The first thing is to ask that question. Once you ask that question, what can I do? Then you start building up some sort of community. You start attaching yourself with different organizations, think tanks, start lobbying your local council, saying, we don't want this in our community. We don't want these books. We don't want Qatari influence. We don't care if they're going to give $3 million to the local library. We don't want it. We know what happens when we allow them in, and we just don't want it anymore. And we want people to be much more aware that what they're seeing around them when they're seeing with the Tucker Carlsons, when they're seeing with the Candace Owens, when they're seeing with the even the left, they are part of a influence takeover, just like the universities were taken over by Qatar. You know, they were given billions of dollars, and they were told, we're not going to control you, but if you want to continue having the money, we don't want you having these Zionist programs anymore. Instead, we want to replace it with Middle East studies with the professors that we want to recommend. And this is the way they work. And yeah, I mean, it's you know, it's a big problem. So I mean, I know we're talking about the actual benefits of what U.S. gets from Israel, but again, I just want to reiterate is that of course they get tremendous benefit, monetary benefit, life benefit, research, development, medicine, you name it. Everything that America has that is great. Imagine we're like the sidecar on America when it comes to innovation. And despite the fact that we're 9 million people in Israel, and opposed to the 330 million people in America, we really carry our weight. We really, really, really carry our weight. Not to mention the fact that it's not many countries in the Middle East that a U.S. serviceman could walk around in uniform and not have to look over his back or even be able to leave the base. I mean, you see an American walking through Tel Aviv. I'll give you an example. We have a big basketball culture here in you know, in Israel, and we get a lot of Americans who come who play basketball on Israeli teams. They're like 6'5", black, braids, cornrows. They walk down the street and people love them. They go on social media and they're saying, "Listen, I know this might be unpopular, but I'd much rather play basketball than in Israel than in America, than in Sweden, in Switzerland, like all these places you think they're so nice." And what did they say? They say because the people are so great to us. The people are so lovely. They're so nice to us. And I think that's at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. It's not about weapons. It's not about benefit. It's about, can you sleep with your eyes closed, you know, in Israel? And the answer is absolutely yes. Can you go into, you know, Qatar and go to sleep? Yes, they'll pamper you and they'll put you in a 5-star hotel, but they're watching everything you're doing, and they're looking at you not as a friend, but as someone to leverage, because they have a plan. You know, they have a plan. They have a plan for the world, and we have a plan for the world. We want to fix the world, right? We want the world to be open and free for the whole world. And so, I mean, this becomes more of like there's so much to unpack here, obviously.
Right. But I'll give you an example. Let's say in America, what are some of the biggest political issues? Healthcare. You know, campaigns are won and lost. So just here are some issues that, you know, I got online about what Israel has done for the West, especially America. PillCam. This is a swallowable camera for internal diagnostics. How many people know what that is? I guarantee nobody. BabySense, which are infant breathing monitors. Rewalk, bionic exoskeletons for people with lower limb paralysis. I mean, how many American servicemen could benefit from this? And there are so many other devices that Israel has innovated and created that I guarantee nobody here knows about. When they talk about healthcare here, it's never even mentioned. So the thing is, and this is what I come back to, Israel has so much and has done so much and given so much. And yet none of that is penetrating into what the average American person knows. That we actually I have to defend myself. Supporters of Israel have to explain to a guy like Tucker Carlson, who knows better. Put it this way, Qatar can give Tucker as much money as they want. But if he knew that he could be smacked down 1, 2, 3, he'd say, you know what, guys, I have to attack Israel differently because I don't want to make a fool of myself. But the fact that he can say that we get nothing from Israel, that he can call Mike Pompeo, former Secretary of State, CIA chief, a liar, and not be afraid of a response means that he knows that nobody in America or the average person doesn't know enough, you know, to defend
Well,
Israel. And
that's exactly it.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. Is that the American public, and it's not against them. I mean, I don't know everything there is to know about, I don't know, Luxembourg, right? I mean, like, how much time do people have to do deep dive research? I think they have to find people that they trust to be able to give them the information. I mean, you go to a doctor because they're expert in it. If you want to talk about Israel affairs, maybe not go to somewhere like a Qatari agent, in order to get information. Try to find information that's again. But there's been a 30 plus year plan for indoctrination.
Yeah.
We know this. It's all documented. The Muslim
CARE
Brotherhood came out
brags
with
about it. CARE brags about how long there's been a long-term plan for them. I'm sorry for interrupting you.
Yeah, I mean, since 1991, they released their plan, a blueprint, how
Yeah.
exactly to take over the West. And Tucker Carlson fits right into the picture,
Yeah.
and the education, the indoctrination, and yeah, I mean, listen, I feel really bad for Americans and Europeans and anybody else, and Africans especially, who are experiencing these cultural shifts under their feet. And it looks like to them a domestic issue. It looks to them like right versus left. This issue with ICE or no ICE, and
Right.
or Israel or no Israel. Where are we going to be on these issues? And everybody gets in there in their silos. You're either on the left, you're on the right on this. And meanwhile, everything is being orchestrated from outside. This is exactly why TikTok is one of the most dangerous technologies to come into the homes and to the hands of children, because the TikTok algorithm is set up in order to create these divisions under these very specific issues. And again, Israel is one of those issues. So yeah, at the end of the day, there's a whole list of things that Israel is able to provide its own citizens and share with the world. And by the way, it's not just America. We share with the whole world. That's our job. We're not here. They say that the Jewish people are like a light upon the nations. We're not a light in like a almost like a we're almost like the moon, right? We're looking to illuminate light around the world. We're not the sun. We're not the light. We're instead we're like this. We're the moon. We're reflecting light, and we want to bring more light into this world, and we want to erase the darkness. And this is why, just naturally, if we create a new technology that saves lives, we will even deploy it to our enemies.
Right.
Because I mean, we saw this during the Syrian civil war. Who's the only country in the world to create a field hospital for the Syrians in Syria, and that was Israel in the Golan Heights. It actually was started by one of my friends, who was in the military at the time. I mean, this is who we are. We look beyond the leadership and we look at people as people. So when it comes to medicine, when it comes to food technology, when it comes to water recycling, Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister, was on TV. He did a video a number of months ago, when the reservoirs in Iran were diminishing,
Right.
to levels that were beyond the point of return. And he's there drinking a glass of water on film, and he's speaking to the people of Iran and saying, "Listen, this doesn't have to be this way.
Right.
We don't need to be at war with each other. You could have food, you could have water, you could have life, you could have open up into the rest of the world if your leadership does not choose this path of destruction of Western civilization, of going after the great Satan, which is America, and the little Satan, which is Israel." But make no mistake, this is not just an Israel America thing. This is also anything Western civilization. So, we love the fact we 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 yearn for our enemies to come to a point where to say, you know what, enough is enough. Let's talk.
Right.
We see it all the time. If the president of Lebanon wants to speak after 40 plus years of war, we'd be the first ones to show up. Let's talk. And not just that, but how exactly do we leverage what we have been developing in order to solidify a relationship? I'll give you one example, and then I'll hand it back to you if you want to continue with something else. But
Sure.
Jordan, Jordan is very quiet on our border. It's not to say there's no danger, but overall, it's been very quiet, despite the fact that we're reinforcing our border, but it has nothing to do with Jordan. It has to do with the fact that they're a very weak country, and we're afraid maybe the Iraqis or whoever is going to come over. But that's besides the point. They receive 10% of their water, and I think that it actually increased recently. 10% of their water intake comes from Israel. We recycle 85% of our water. We have desalination plants running 24/7.
Right.
Just 15 years ago, the UN came out with a report predicting that the next war in the Middle East was going to be about water, the lack of water, war about water. With our relationship with Jordan, we flipped that narrative. We said we're not going to have war. We're going to have peace with water, right? We're not going to fight over water. We're going to create peace with water. And by the way, the same time that this report was going on in Israel, the water authorities were telling us not to take a shower more than 2 minutes. Don't wash your cars, don't wash your lawn. We were
Right.
going through a drought at the same exact time. Now look at us today. We have so much water; it's coming out of our ears, and we're sending a tremendous amount of water to Jordan.
So years ago, I was watching the APAC conference. I was watching it on Zoom or on whatever we had back then, and they brought in this delegation from Africa, and I'm thinking, okay, what does a delegation from Africa have to do with Israel? And the subject had to do with drip irrigation. They were showing that because of Israeli technology, these third world African nations were able to grow their own crops and feed themselves. I'm thinking, why do I have to watch this on an APAC thing? Why isn't this come out? Why isn't this spoken about more? So again, it comes back to again, with all the good that Israel does, with all of the, all the awards that Israelis have won in every subject from math to science to you name it. And we're still, again, people can attack us. I don't care if you don't like me because I'm Jewish, but it's reaching a boiling point where even American politicians are splitting over they're like the checking, is it safe to be with Israel? Turning Point USA. Okay, Charlie Kirk was one of the staunchest supporters of Israel. But even he said before he passed away, before he was murdered, that he was seeing a rise in anti-Semitism from young conservatives. So this is coming
Yeah.
from false information being fed them, not another point of view about Israel and Jews.
No, and I'll tell you, and I want to reiterate to you because this is coming out. It's already being mapped. The Muslim Brotherhood has been very has orchestrated this.
Right.
So it's not just it didn't happen organically. This was orchestrated.
Right. Well, I can see it sometimes from the questions. I'm seeing young college kids asking questions that looks like it was fed to them. They didn't
Of course.
just come out, with these certain things, like on their cell phones learning about the Talmud, and Charlie would just smack them down because they couldn't answer them. So you're seeing it now with the USS Liberty being revived from 1967. Tell me, these college students, they know their history that well that they know about the USS Liberty. So,
No, you know
right,
what it comes from? It comes from these social media influencers
yeah,
that are being paid across the board. They're decentralized, so there's no real branding connection between them. They look like they're coming out and creating some organic content, but what
right.
they're really doing is they're actually parroting content that was given to them with an envelope full of cash.
And Gedaliah Blum, we've got a few minutes left here. I know it's getting late in Israel. Um, Tell us more, if you would, about the Heartland Initiative. I've watched you on YouTube, and I've seen a bunch of YouTubes where I think you open up with while you were sleeping or something like that. So tell us more about the work that you're doing besides creating videos and slapping down Tucker Carlson.
So, Heartland Initiative is a independent NGO that works that works in international public diplomacy. And the idea behind it is that while the state of Israel does a great job. It is a government, and they do work slow, and they have to work slow, and there is bureaucracy, and there are guidelines and bench, like there are borders from where they can and cannot go
Right.
because they deal with a lot of geopolitics. So I work in the same space. I create bridges between leaders and leaders, church leaders and religious leaders. And the idea behind it is not to work in an official capacity, but a
Right.
non-official capacity, but really do like on the ground, real relationship building over a beer, over a glass of wine. And we've worked with many leaders around the world very successfully, from all the way from mayor to very high level.
Can you give us
And
some examples of stuff that would make us go, really? I didn't know that.
so the problem is I can't really share a lot. And
Okay.
the reason why I can't share too much is because the environment in which we live in,
Right.
where if there are government leaders who are in private
Uh,
are very praiseworthy of Israel,
right.
they don't come out publicly because for them it's not worth spending that political capital.
Right.
But I will say this. We did find a very brave soul who is a leader of a very large church, many millions of people, and a church in Africa. And they were facing an election of a government that was very anti-Israel. And the church leader, I worked with many partners, which I always do. I always work with many partners, so it's not something I ever do on my own. But um, he spoke to his own people in his own native tongue, from Israel, from Jerusalem, telling his people that the God of Israel is with the people of Israel, and our government is against Israel. So therefore, our government is against God. And that was the first time. 2 weeks later, there was an election, and that was the first time that that ruling party didn't get a overwhelming majority. And that kind of diplomacy is real. And I know that and I watched some of your previous show with Tuvia Singer, Rabbi Tuvia Singer,
Right.
who talks about this idea of connection through our shared values through the Bible. And
Right.
I think that is going to be the core way, the main way that we are able as Jews and Israel to be able to strengthen our position. But here's the secret though. We're not connecting to Christians to strengthen Israel because Israel's going to be here. We're strong and we'll be okay. But I think right now Christians are having a major crisis. And I think that Jews have much more to offer them than we would actually get from Christians. But I think that's where the mutual reciprocity comes in, and that's where the real friendships come in, and that's what I'm actually building with through the Heartland Initiative. And we also have a media arm. We have a media arm that we run a breaking news X page called Mossad IL, and which we're expanding
Mm.
and creating more programming and more shows. And we want to create much more of a powerful channel in opposed to just a X page with breaking news. So
Wow.
this is all connected. It's all connected. Our messaging, our partnership, and what I went back to, what I mentioned beforehand is that our focus is focusing on activating our friends and not necessarily trying to change minds. And I think that if more people spent more time trying to activate their friends instead of being distracted by the
Right.
very loud and very organized and very well funded minority, I think that we would be winning a lot more.
So the thing is about activating our friends, and again, I agree with it, but here's like my thing is that I want us Jews to be able to take care of ourselves and not ask, well, how come the Gentiles are not speaking up for us? It can't always be that we're relying on others to speak up for us when so many of us, I mean, I'm here in America, and all these Jewish groups I don't know what they do besides fundraise. But it can't always be that we have to rely on how come others aren't speaking up for us. That's not a winning formula. We need them, and again, they gain by standing with us. But our strength has to come from us. I'll give you another example, going completely off topic. You familiar with Palestinian Media Watch and Memory? Okay, these groups have everything, in my opinion, that we need to defeat our enemies. And yet that information doesn't get used. It's not widely used. In Congress, there's Randy Fine from Florida. So he cites memory. He's one guy. There should be a memory caucus in Washington and in every parliament around the world, because it's not the Jews, making up what Islam wants to do to you. They're telling you what they want to do to you. And yet that information is staying so almost in the closet that if we don't speak in a megaphone about it, it's not being heard. And Americans, you talk America first. Look at who you're throwing the Jews. Okay, you don't like Jews, fine, but you're throwing us under the bus for people who are publicly saying that they're going to put an ISIS flag on the White House, so on and so
Well,
on. They're going to take over the news. Go ahead.
I mean, I think like this. I think that, we see what happens when countries get rid of their Jews. Okay. Now, on a more of a funny level, Robin Williams, the famous comedian
Yeah.
actor, Robin Williams, not Jewish, by the way, but
Right.
many people thought he was Jewish. Um, he was in Germany and he was being interviewed in Germany,
Yeah.
and the interviewer asked him, Robin, can you explain to me why you think that Germany doesn't have a that Germany doesn't have a we don't have comedy,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
They're like, things aren't funny. And he said, did you ever think that you killed all the funny people?
Yeah.
And that was
I
his
saw
and that was
that.
his response.
That was
And
recent.
it was funny, but it also is very telling. Number
Yeah.
one, it's true. I
Yeah.
think that, Jews in general are somehow are culturally are able to have, be self-depreciating, which is a very high level of emotional intelligence, and then you get the comedic aspect of it as well. But I think overall, I mean, you look at the Arab countries who also got rid of their Jews. Where's the scientists? Where's the medicine? Where's the innovation? Where's the
Right.
development? And I think that people really need to do a deep dive in history and say, like, you know, leave leave these conspiracy theories aside for a second, and let's look throughout history and see what happens when countries got rid of their Jews. What happened afterwards? I mean, Spain. The golden era of Spain was prior to the Inquisition, and then the Inquisition happened. All the Jews were kicked out if they weren't killed or forcibly converted, and then it all kind of went downhill from there. Even now, they still haven't recovered. Spain is not a very strong country, even after 500 years plus. And so, we're seeing that. And then you look at all the Jews who come to one country, Israel.
Right.
Look how strong we are. Look how strong we are.
Exactly.
Why wouldn't people want Jews in their country? Why wouldn't they want them? I don't understand. But I do see it as part of this, again, this orchestrated plan, this disinformation. It's not even about information, by the way. It's about money and influence, because you're seeing people who absolutely know the truth, but they don't care. It's not because they have other interests. They would rather, Adolf Hitler was told by his generals, stop utilizing these trains at the end of the war to transport Jews to their death when our soldiers don't have proper supplies. Use the trains for supplies. And he said, no, we're gonna continue with the Jews. There's this there's I mean, again, I'm going all in different
Right.
directions, but I I think that there's so many levels to this that it's really, it should be studied by it can be studied by psychiatrists, and it has been for thousands of years, about the Jew hatred, misinformation, blood
Right.
libels, and everything that goes along with it.
Yeah. Okay, Gedaliah Blum, it was an honor to speak with you. I'm so happy that I found you on Facebook. I loved your video. And I want to just wish you continued success in all the work that you're doing. And one day we'll talk, and I'm going to pry out of you all the work that you've done that you couldn't tell us today. Great.
Great.
Okay,
Good
great
deal.
seeing you. Thank you.
Thank you.